that being said, allow me to introduce my two panelists we have today. We have Christy Hansen, Associate Dean, Career and Professional Development, Messiah College. And we also have Trevor Creedon, Director of College and Career Counseling, Delaware County Christian School. Thank you both so much for taking the time to present today. And whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here and get started and share with you quickly here a topic that's dear to my heart and something that I've been counseling students on for going on 18 years now. And I'm currently, like Alex said, the Director of College and Career Counseling at Delaware County Christian School. And the things that I'm going to be talking to you about today are things that are most important, that I think are crucial to a student understanding and really knowing when they want to find a college that they're going to thrive at, emotionally, academically, mentally, physically, all those things. So without further ado, I'm going to touch on 5 different areas and then end with a slide that talks about the hidden gems and what does that mean. And the first aspect of finding the right fit is academic, and probably the one that gets the most attention and should, because academically, that is what colleges are going to look for first. They're going to read the application. That's the first thing they read. They're going to get your background. They're going to understand who you are a bit. They're going to know, where you're coming from, but then they're going to look at that transcript. And academic fit means a number of things. They want to see growth. They want to see improvement. They want to see how you've done over the course of 3 years. And they should emphasize this the most because it's a lot of time and effort that you put in. And so grade point averages are different for different schools. So colleges are going to do different things sometimes with the grades, and they may recalculate the GPA. They may go by whatever GPA you provide, but they're going to want to see that a student has progressed and done well over the course of 3 years. And I mentioned 3 because senior year does count and the courses you take do matter. But colleges only are guaranteeing if you're going to be applying to a school between September and December of your junior year or senior year, that they're going to guarantee they view your grades and consider them through 9, 10, 11. So keep that in mind. Know that 11th grade does play a little bit more important of a factor. Not like the grades count any differently, but it is important that they see that growth and that rigor on your schedule, that you continue to push yourself and do everything necessary to show that you're maturing and involved. And so grade point average is important. Mid 50% SAT, ACT scores. I understand in the current times that we're in that for this year's juniors, this may be a bit different, but know that even if schools are going to go test optional, that doesn't mean test blind. All right. They still, a number of schools would like to see scores, are going to accept scores, and they can matter. But in normal times, all right, mid 50%, you can know whether that's a good fit for you depending on how you do on the SAT or ACT and what ranges those schools are saying are their mid 50% ranges. And you can find those on websites like College Data, search tools like Score is the program we use. Naviance is what other schools also use as programs where you can know that information. And so acceptance rate, the lower the acceptance rate that a school has, the more difficult obviously it is to get in. So understand that if acceptance rate is lower, that could be a reach for anybody. And so if that acceptance rate is 30, 40% between that and 60%, know that if you're a good student, now that becomes a target school. And so I mentioned reach, target, and safety because when you apply to certain schools academically, you want to know whether that's a reach, a target, or a safety, and have a balanced list of schools when you apply, but also make that list of schools ahead of time and understand that it is balanced and I need to find schools in each of those different areas. And so In-state, out-of-state, real quick. Obviously, in-state may be less competitive. However, there are competitive schools within the state. Some schools are more competitive to get in than others. Out-of-state, understand it may be a bit more competitive because they don't take as many students out of state. And so that's important to understand as well. Honors program and college. Honors colleges could be a good fit for students who like that academic rigor, who want to push themselves a bit more academically, but then don't want to be in an environment where that is a school that has that environment in its totality, or I'm trying to figure out the word, but some of these schools, if they're higher, as far as competitiveness goes, they have a low acceptance rate, they're going to have a bit more of an intense academic environment. And students at that school are going to be from the top 10% probably of their high schools. And so know that that is a different environment at that school. And so honors programs are a way to get the best of both worlds, honors colleges, where you can be in that academic rigor, have a bit more of it, but then be at a bigger, larger flagship state university. I also put in there about receiving accommodations. That's important for those that get extra time, that note taking, other things that they may need that they've had in high school. If they want to have those in college, there's schools that are a better fit for you there as well. That took the longest. These won't be as long, but geographic is important to understand. Distance from home. Know that the further you go away, are you an independent person? Are you somebody that, can go a bit further and be okay? Have you gone far from home yet? How did you do? Know that that's an important thing to take into account as well. And also know that if you're less than 2 hours, you can get home on a weekend. If you're between 2 and 5, probably going to need 3 or 4 days to be comfortable to come home. If you're beyond 5, 6 hours to about 11 or 12, you may be able to drive home in one day, but really you're just coming home on long breaks. Definitely beyond 12, you might be flying, and it might depend on how many tickets you want to buy at that point. Weather seems obvious, but that's a question I ask my students. Do you prefer warm? Do you prefer cold? You may say it doesn't matter, but there are students who do like to be in one type of weather than another. And that's not something that's going to determine your school, but it's something to definitely consider. Region of the country. Know that different people act differently, all right, in different parts of the country. They say things differently. They do things differently, all right? Know what before you get there, all right, and adjust, and what do they do, and what are the things that you need to understand. I say that, I have a book that I show my juniors that says, like, people from the South, and I've worked in the South for 7 years. Also, now I've been back to the North here for 10. People in the South think people in the North, are rude, all right, maybe unfriendly. I don't think that's true. People from the North think people from the South tend to be slower, late to things. I mean, it's a culture thing, and it's not true, but know that when you get into a different region, you got to understand a bit differently of how things go, okay? Urban, suburban, rural, that's another question I ask. Make sure you understand if you want to be in a city environment, you want to be outside of a city, do you mind being where there's a lot of land, and you have to maybe drive a little bit further to get somewhere? Those are important factors also to take into account. And then the size of the city. New York, Philly, Chicago, DC, they're different than, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. Those cities may be a little bit smaller, and you may enjoy that environment a little bit better. But also you might just like to be in a town that has a number of things to do, but it's not as populated. So know that as a factor as well, and do you prefer that? School personality, you have the size of the school, so that's a huge one. Do you feel more comfortable in an environment where I could be a number a little bit, where there's 30,000 plus students? I take students on a trip each year, and we go to Penn State, and I've seen, even at Penn State, there's students everywhere, and you just got to be okay with that. You got to know that I'm comfortable in that environment. I don't mind it. Some students don't like being in that environment. They don't want the small school either, less than 2,000. So size of school can matter, and school visits are important to do to find that out. Class size, do you mind being in the school, a class of 200 plus, where they have breakout groups as well with grad students? Do you like that? You can thrive academically in that environment? Or do you need to be in a class that's maybe less than 50? So understand that as well. Highly academic, I mentioned that earlier. Some of the more competitive admission schools, the students they take have done really well, and that's great. And you may see those schools have, are at the top of the rankings that go out there, but know that the environment is going to be probably a little more intense and more academic, and you may feel a little more pressure to do well. That's maybe not true for some, but it may be true for others, okay? Commuter residential, know that you go to a school, you got to understand that at some maybe public schools, more or less, private schools tend to be more residential, and 90% or more usually stay on campus. But at public schools, know that it could be half, it could be 40% of the students leave on the weekend. And you don't want to be caught going, man, I didn't know this many people left. So ask that question too, if you're applying to certain schools. And I throw on here ESPN schools. This is more of the South than it is the North, but I do have students up here that do the same thing, where they get the SEC and the ACC, and it should never be your factor of going to a school. I can't wait to go to the tailgates, or I can't wait to party, on game days. Those things are fun, but hopefully they're not your top 3 things that you should want to do. All right. I want to mention talent, because this is a unique category that if you are pursuing something in this area, that the important thing to understand is this will drive the process. And so there are certain things you need to make sure you're doing to really do it well when it comes to these areas. If you are talented and you are getting attention from colleges, and you know that I want to major in, say, a fine art, visual art, a dance program, even instrumental, these are all great things, but now they're going to be the main reason you are going to a school. And so that's important to make sure you decide before you start looking into schools, is if this is going to drive, if athletic and you want to play, then how much attention are you getting? What division do you want to play? All these things are good questions, but it's also going to be the dictator of what schools you end up applying to. I could spend more time than I have here on financial, but I just want to point out a few things. Every school that you apply to should be also a financial fit. That's my advice. In-state, out-of-state. You know that in-state is going to be less of a cost than out-of-state. However, out-of-state schools, typically, if it's a little bit further away from home, and I encourage my students too, if it's a little bit further from home, understand that they may want to pull more students from where you live. They may want to get more students from out of state. And so they may offer you more merit-based aid. And if they do, they could match in-state of what they charge. They could match the in-state from where the state is you're from. Okay, so that's important also keep in mind. But in-state will always be less costly than out of state. Sticker price, that means that's the number that the colleges put out there that you will have to pay if they don't give you a dime of money. That's the sticker price. I always tell my students, if the college is making you pay the sticker price at their school, if it's not an in-state public school that already has a lot lower tuition, try to find another school to go to, because you should always try to or get some merit or grant or some money from a school in order for them to lower the price. I have a hard time encouraging any of my students to pay a sticker price at the school that the school hasn't given them anything. The FAFSA CSS profile, those are financial aid applications that all the colleges will require. The FAFSA is what all colleges require. The CSS profile, there's about 400 schools that require the CSS profile. And the lower schools that have lower acceptance rates, the 100% meet need schools are the ones that will ask for the CSS profile. So you may have to complete both, but definitely the FAFSA. And those are important documents for you to get familiar with and to know how to complete. The EFC is the number you're going to get back from the FAFSA and the CSS profile that will tell you this is how much you need to pay for this college, or not specifically the college, but the EFC is what you as a family, parents, most likely, and the student will need to pay for that year at any of the schools you apply to. So the colleges get that number from the FAFSA after you complete it, from the government. They'll get that EFC, and then that's where they're going to build your financial aid packages from, your financial aid award letter that you get after you've been accepted. The net price calculator is a calculator that you should fill out before you apply anywhere, because it's a good tool that's been now online at a lot of all schools' websites for about 5 years now, that should give you an idea of what you should pay, and you put in your financial information there. Scholarships, you should always look for merit and local, private, national scholarship. You should merit, especially at every school, they're going to offer incoming freshmen scholarships. If you've done well academically, you need to see how many of those and how much money you can get. I always encourage my students, that's where the target and the safety schools come into play. Those are the schools you should be getting more merit-based scholarship money to attend. And grants and loans, grants you don't have to pay back, loans you do, but these are things that get put into your financial aid award package at the end. Hopefully less loans, but loans you will need to pay back later. These are some resources. I'll skip through these pretty quick, but when if you watch this presentation again, you can look up these as well. These are things I share with my students, some resources. And lastly, keep searching. I mean, there's tools, whether your school uses SCORE, whether they use Naviance, make sure you keep searching and finding what fit, because there's searches out there that you can put in the criteria you want or you prefer, or just change things up and try this and try that, and then come up with the schools that, and save those and put those on your list that you want to look into more after you've done searches. And then after junior year, I tell my students, you should be at 12 to 15 schools that you're thinking about, you're considering, and then move into about 6 to 8 schools that you want to apply to come senior year. They tend to be more popular colleges within certain regions in the country. You're obviously looking for the lower cost but high value. They call that return on investment. You want to find those schools that are going to cost less, but you know, all right, it's going to be a great experience because it fits what you want, and it is a school that you're going to thrive at, again, academically, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, all those things. That's what you're looking for. And so what is the best fit for you? I hope this presentation helped you just a bit understand that. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, at this point, we are going to transition into talking about what are the factors then that you should consider in choosing a best fit major. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can talk about that. As Alex said at the beginning, my name is Christy Hansen, and I serve as Associate Dean for Career Development at Messiah College, which is right outside the capital of Pennsylvania. And, you know, choosing a major is another important decision, just like choosing a college is. And at times I understand that this can feel a bit overwhelming, particularly when you're looking at colleges that might have 100+ options to pick from. And so I hope over the course of the next several minutes that I'm able to give you some tips. I will give you an exercise that you can run through to move you a little closer to a decision that is going to be best for you. Now, before I do that, I do feel compelled to lay out some of what I hear as the most common myths around choosing a major. And I'm going to start with one of my favorites, which is most students come to college already decided, which then can, of course, make you feel like I'm the only one who doesn't know what to major in. To major in. The reality is, the statistic is about 80% of college students end up changing their major at least one time during their college career. And at many colleges, the undecided major tends to be the #1 choice of incoming students. So it is a very common thing for students to enter into college without a major yet declared. And my bias here is that I think it actually situates a lot of students well to really have an open mind and an exploratory perspective where they're considering all of the options that are before them. Myth number 2, choosing a major and a career are the same thing. Now, I want to explain something that might oversimplify the point, but I think it's helpful to understand the different camps of majors. So I like to think of majors as falling into one of 2 camps. The first camp is a pre-professional major that leads to a very specific career path. So in some cases, particularly around those majors, they lead to, once again, a very predetermined path. So engineering may be an example of that, nursing, accounting, education, etc. So the relationship between the major and the career is pretty clear-cut. And in many cases, quite honestly, the professional fields that those majors end up entering have a set of prerequisites or expectations or even state level standards for somebody to enter into that profession. That tends to be more the minority than the majority of majors. Most majors tend to open up a whole plethora of options professionally for our students. And so the relationship between the major and the careers that students end up entering may not be quite so clear cut, and that's okay. The major, in a sense, is a foundation that allows students to go deep in a particular area while gaining a breadth of skill sets that positions them for that kind of flexibility. So I think it's important to note that for most students, a major is not actually a prescription for a career. And, you know, I think as you start to look at the data that schools put out there about what their graduates are doing, you start to see the fuzziness around that relationship, which I hope provides a little bit of freedom to not feel so much anxiety about necessarily choosing the wrong thing and precluding yourself from a whole lot of different opportunities. Which is a good segue to this third one, that choosing one major means I'm eliminating all other possibilities that exist out there. I think once you start taking a closer look, colleges actually provide some really creative ways for students to combine a variety of interests. One of my favorite stories is a student I worked with who combined she was an accounting major and she also added a dance major. Which seemed completely in different fields, but she imagined herself one day owning a dance studio and the importance of understanding the business that goes along with that. So whether it's double majoring in one thing and minoring in another, or majoring in something and then complementing that major with experiences or even coursework in a variety of other ways, allows students to combine a variety of different interests. Myth number 4, well, I'll just put off that choice about a major and I will get all of my general education requirements out of the way before I even think about that. Any college that you go to, you will be assigned an academic advisor who is there to help you in coursework selection. And also, if you are undecided, to consider how you might begin taking courses in areas that might be of interest to you so that you can start moving forward in that. There are a lot of majors that have sequencing of courses. So you need to take one thing in order to move on to the next phase. And some courses at some institutions may only be offered on alternate semesters or alternate years. So you will have sources of support who are there to help you consider a balance of courses in potential majors as well as general education. Myth number 5, another one of my favorites. If you are one of those folks out there considering what we would call a more traditional liberal arts major, like history or philosophy or English, don't fall for the myth that you will never get a job. And I think the easiest response to this is looking at the data. There are so many great resources out there that talk about the value that the liberal arts and general education bring to the college experience and eventually to the workplace. So I think the data really speaks for itself in this particular myth. Okay, so we're going to move into now, how do you make a decision? What are some of the factors to consider? And I want to present to you what I like to call the fit pie, okay? Now, the ultimate goal here around choosing a major is that you make an informed decision. And informed is the key word here. And I think if you go through this process by considering these three elements, that is going to lead you to a decision that's not haphazard, that's not off the cuff, that you have come to with a lot of reflection, a lot of testing out the opportunity or the possibilities around that. So when we consider the elements that make up a best fit major, they tend to comprise the following slices. And so I'm going to take just a few minutes on each to explain these in a bit more detail. And we're going to do this actually through an exercise that I hope following this presentation that you yourself will replicate. And so maybe even this would be a good time to jot down some notes around this as we go through it. So you want to, first of all, choose a college, any of the colleges that are on your list of possibilities, and you want to find the list of all of the majors that they offer, okay? And I would encourage you even to print out that list, and you can do this with any of the colleges that you're looking at. Sometimes it's actually easiest to start with what we don't like, because sometimes we're more sure about what we do like or what we don't like than what we do like. And so what I would encourage you to start doing is with that list of majors, cross out all of the majors that you are confident at this point you have no interest in pursuing. So if you would say, you know what, I can't draw a stick figure if my life depended on it, and therefore art is out of the question, go ahead and cross that off now. Our goal here is to whittle down this list so it becomes less overwhelming, and we know exactly what we're dealing with, what's on the table. So I also want you to put a star by any of the majors on that list that you would say are definitely of interest to you right now. Now, there also may be some majors on that list that you've never heard of, but maybe just by the title of it, there's something about it that intrigues you. So go ahead and put a question mark by those, and that will maybe signal to you that you need to explore that one a little bit further. Now, I am going to encourage you to create yourself a spreadsheet, okay? And this will be a place where you gather all of the information that I'm going to encourage you to gather through this exercise. There is something that can be incredibly valuable by bringing all of this together and having a visual where we can start to look for themes and patterns that might emerge. So this is a sample of what it could look like in your spreadsheet. You see in the far left column here, all of the majors that you did not cross out on your list that are still there for consideration. What I would encourage you to do is try to challenge yourself to list those out from most interest to least interest down that first column, okay? And now what you're gonna do is you're gonna put every one of those majors through the ringer of these next three columns. So these are the slices of pie that I presented to you just a minute ago. We're gonna look at what's the academic info for this particular major? What's the curriculum that I would enter if I chose this? What are career options that might be a close fit for folks who pursue this particular major? And thirdly, how does this major fit with who I am, what my strengths are, what my interests are, etc. So again, I'm going to encourage you to just create some simple spreadsheet like this, and then this will be your place where you log all the research that you go on to do. Okay, so I'm going to start with actually the last column that just showed up on that spreadsheet. So this is one slice of that pie, and we're going to call this self-assessment. Now, this is really a time for you to just pause and reflect on and actually write down what some of your strengths and interests and talents might be. So at this point in your life, how would you describe those? And I want you to try to get as specific as possible. What are the things that you've noticed come more naturally to you? What are the things that are energizing to you? What have other people told you that you're good at? Okay. Now, most of what we come to find that our interests and our strengths are come through actually having experiences, whether that's courses that we have taken, hobbies we've pursued, etc. We want to pay attention to experiences from our past that stand out. Okay, so of those different things that you have done, what are highlights for you from those experiences and why? So if you would say, for example, that being part of this particular club at school was super energizing to me, ask yourself, what about it was energizing? Did you enjoy taking a leadership role? Did you enjoy taking notes from the meeting? What we're trying to get here at what tasks and what opportunities and responsibilities might be a good fit with what comes most naturally to you. So I want to give you a couple prompts just to get your brain going in this area. So I want you to consider, are you drawn to or driven to the following things? Creating, educating or teaching, caring for others, advocating for others, learning new things, guiding or advising others, analyzing or solving problems, leading, performing, distilling knowledge, information, or concepts. So those are the types of things I want you to begin thinking about as far as what are some of those core motivators and energizers for you. So if you would like, you can certainly seek out self-assessment tools that can assist you in this process. There's a number of free ones out there. There may be options of these kind of tools at your high schools or even at the colleges that you might consider. I know this is something that we actually offer for free to our prospective students, so you might want to inquire about that. But what you're going to do, back to this spreadsheet, as you go through the majors that you're going to consider, you're going to jot some notes down in that far right column about, okay, the things that I wrote down about myself, the more I learn about XYZ major, how am I seeing a fit or not with the things that I've just written down about my strengths and my interests? All right, let's move on to the second piece of the pie, which is academic information. I'm going to encourage you to read as much as you possibly can about the academic department that houses any of the majors that you're considering, as well as the courses you'd be required to take for that particular major. So majors are housed within an academic department, okay? And most schools are very good at putting information out about who that department is, what the experience is like for students who belong to that department, and any of the majors within it. So as you read through these things, you want to pay attention to what's jumping out at you. Are you noticing that you're getting more excited the more you read, or less excited? Look at the faculty profiles within that department, because these are the people that you're going to take courses from. What do their profiles say about their interests, and how well do they mesh with your own interests? Which of the courses that you would be required to take are most interesting or least interesting? One of the most simple keys to looking at whether, or clues I should say, to looking at whether a major would be a good fit is how well you would enjoy taking the courses. So I get concerned if I have a student come to me and say, I'm pursuing this major because if I major in this, I'm going to get a job in this field, which is going to pay me a lot of money, but I'm going to hate being in this major. That's usually an indicator that you're probably not going to enjoy some of the facets of that career path either. So you should enjoy the majority of courses that go along with the major you eventually end up with. You also want to know things like, is there a minimum GPA that I would need to maintain to be in this major? How likely is it that I could do that? What stories do they tell about their graduates from that particular major? What are they doing now? What types of internships or other experiences do students in this major have? If you have trouble finding any of this information on their website, ask for it. Ask an admissions counselor how you might be able to get it. Okay, I do want to go back here just for a second. Again, I want you to keep coming back. As you're doing that for each of the majors, you're going to write down in the academic info, here's some pros and cons about major 1, major 2, from the curriculum, from what I saw on the department website. So you want to keep coming back here and document your findings and what's standing out to you. Okay, third slice of the pie, career options. Now, the caveat here is something I mentioned earlier, and that is to remember that in most cases, a major is not a prescription for a particular or specific career path. However, we can see trends in the types of careers that individuals with a particular major might be more apt to pursue. So, most career centers collect data on the outcomes of their graduates, what careers they pursue, what graduate schools they get into, etc. They also likely have resources on career options that fit well with certain majors. One of my very favorites that a lot of colleges subscribe to is something called What Can I Do with a Major In? It's a resource that has been cultivated through the University of Tennessee, so that might be a good one to look at. My plan also offers some free resources that you might want to check out as well. But again, as you do some research on career options that might be aligned with some of the majors, go back, document any that stand out to you on that spreadsheet. Now, this next slide might be a tiny bit hard to read. That's really not the point. What I wanted to do, this is an actual student spreadsheet who knew that she wanted to land somewhere in the health sciences, but she was really trying to discern between several different options in there. And so you can see just an example of, here are some of the things that she documented in each of the columns. And she said at the end of this, it was amazing how much clarity came to the forefront after she had to write all of these things down. So I just want to emphasize the value of doing that. I also want to say to you, as you go through this exercise, you might notice that some of the options that you initially were really excited about, suddenly you're not quite as excited about. In fact, they might just get thrown off your list, and that's okay. So you might notice your list shifting as you gather this information, which is a good thing. So where do you go from here? Just want to give you some sort of next steps. I want you to walk through the major exploration exercise we just talked about for any of the majors that are on the table for consideration for you. I want you to put all those notes in a spreadsheet and have somebody look through it with you. Don't go this alone. Use the resources, the mentors, the family members and friends around you who can speak in maybe from a more objective standpoint. Conduct preliminary research on career paths of interest. So if you came across the path of an occupational therapist and you really didn't think about that, but suddenly that's sounding really interesting, do some research on that. Consider connecting with a faculty member in the department that houses a major that you are very seriously considering and have a conversation with them. Another thing you can do now is set up information interviews and or job shadowing experiences with some of those professionals in the fields that you're considering. So you can complement the information you're collecting from the web and all of these other resources with a very real world personal perspective. I think the most important thing here is that you take initiative and you start this process early. So at this point, we are going to address some of the FAQs before we open it up for some of the questions. So I'm going to, at this point, the first three, let Trevor address with you.
Sure. Real quick, what does reach, target, and safety mean? I just want to quickly mention that reach means that your percent chances of getting in are probably lower than 30%. Now I'm going to say 30 is borderline, but understand that you could get straight A's, you could have done everything you needed to do, and it still could be a reach, because if the acceptance rate is below 10%, they're getting thousands of applications, and they're going to need to choose students and make tough choices, even students who've are in the top of their class or have great scores. So a reach means that your chance of getting your 30% or less. Target means that you're in that 30 to 60 range percent, and safety means that your chances of getting in are probably about 60%, 70% or higher. So there's a lot of things unpacked there, but that's basically what that means. Are there better or best colleges? I'm not a big fan of these terms, and this is why I brought this question up, because I get this question a lot. Some students, parents think best schools mean those on the top of the ranking. They mean better means that they have a better reputation within their circle of friends. And it's important not to label schools better or best. It's the most important thing is to look at the schools, research them, see if they're meeting the areas and the things that you think are important for you to thrive there. And that becomes the better school for you, or the best school for you. And so that's one thing I wanted to point out. And then how do you search for a college? There's many different ways. I mean, I would go first to your school, and is there a program that you're using at school? Like I mentioned in my presentation, we use SCORE. There's also Naviance. There's Cialfo. There's programs that schools are using that have search features and search engines that you can go in and look for schools. College Board is a good website to go to. My Future, it's called, in College Board. collegedata.com is another website, but there's many websites to use that you can search colleges for.
And then I will just really quickly tackle the last two questions on this page. When do you absolutely need to make up your mind about a major? I think it's important to recognize that every college or university is going to have its own timeline when it comes to this, so this would be a really good question to ask. I know at our institution, you can be undecided up until the end of your sophomore year, so that gives quite a bit of time for students to explore and make their decision. And finally, what if I choose a major that I end up not liking? First of all, this is very, very, very common and natural. I think it's a natural part of the exploration process. At most institutions, it's actually quite easy to make changes. I've known students who've made changes 2-3 times. Hopefully that won't be your situation if you're going through all of this work to do some good research and make an informed decision. But know that if you end up making a choice that ends up not being a good fit, there is a process in place to make a change. And in many cases, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to be at the college or university any longer than you initially planned to. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I believe that we will be taking some questions.
Yes, thank you both so much for that presentation. It was very well done, and we appreciate the time you take. And yes, so throughout your presentation, there have been plenty of questions asked by plenty of people. I've accumulated some of the questions, so we're going to go through as many as we can right now. So the first question I have here, and a lot of common themes in this, is that should you choose a college before thinking about majors, or the other way around?
Christy, you can take that.
Okay, that is a great question. I think in part it depends on how specialized some of the majors are that you're looking at. So, for example, there aren't a ton of colleges out there who have marine biology programs. So if you're looking for something very, very specialized, you might want to sort of speed up the process of looking at colleges that have some of those more specialty majors. But there are lots of scenarios where a student makes the decision about a college because they know ultimately their major's in there somewhere, but the idea of finding a place that fits with the values that Trevor talked about earlier is first and foremost. So I've seen students really approach this both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And then just moving on to another question, this one pertaining to target, reach, and safety schools. The question is simply, could you explain more on how to decide a reach, target, and safety college?
It's really going to come up to where are you academically. And so if you got to look at what grades you've earned and then where your scores are, and then to me, that will then, looking at the school's information, let you know if that school will be in that reach, target, or safety area. And so it's important to understand, as of middle end of junior year, where do I stand? Make your list initially about of schools that you want to look more into, that have been recommended to you, that you found when you're searching, that you visited. That's what you make your initial list of. Then, as at the end of junior year, you start looking at how many of those schools and where are they as far as a reach, target, and safety. And then am I balanced? Do I have a few reach? Do I have a couple target schools? But then do I have a couple safety? And sometimes those are the hardest to put on your list, because a lot of times students and parents think those schools are the ones that are not as good because they're too easy to get into, and it's not true. There's many great schools out there that are your safety options.
Can I just add something to that?
Absolutely.
I think that's so great. In a lot of ways, this is a time to really ask what is the purpose of college and what do you want out of it? It's certainly very easy to have at the top of our minds, where's this going to take me eventually? But, I also think it's good to think about who do I want to become, and what place is going to help me become that type of person, right? And so that's where some of the things beyond major and GPA and academics are worthwhile to consider. What are some of those experiences outside of the classroom that really matter to me, because I believe they're going to influence the person that I really desire to become?
Excellent. Thank you both so much for that response. Just going on to our next question here. And I thought this one's really pertinent to the topic at hand. What if your strengths are different from your interests? Which one is more important when deciding a school? A major, I apologize.
So good. And this is a conversation that I have had a number of times over the years with students. And a lot of times I'm interested in something, but my strengths aren't matching it, right? Or I've also heard students say, I'm really good at math, but I don't want to be a statistician. I don't want to be a math teacher, et cetera, et cetera. So I want you to sort of take the long view and consider this as a journey. None of us can possibly wrap our brains around all of the possibilities that exist out there. So to be able to even imagine where you might be able to use some of your strengths, this is part of the exploration journey, right? This is the type of thing that you might be able to have really good conversation with a career counselor about. Because maybe at this point, my idea of what I could do with my strengths is actually pretty limited to the things that I know at this point. And so, stay curious about that, because a couple of things might happen where, and I see this happen a lot, experience can sometimes be the biggest teacher to us about who we are and what our interests actually are. And at this point, and this is why I love working in college, is because you're about to embark on a journey where the opportunity for you to get more experience and test out those strengths and those interest areas is about to explode, right? So stay the course, but those are great questions to explore now and in the future.
And I'll also add to that, it's all about wanting to continually learn what you enjoy. And so you may not be that great at it right now, but if you're passionate about it and you still you're excited to learn more and you're excited to explore more, that's a big factor in my perspective.
Good
point. Very good points, both of you. That was excellent response, very helpful for the audience, I'm sure. I have another question here asking, I've received hundreds of emails from lots of different colleges. What do you recommend to determine which ones stand out for me?
The College Board, believe it or not, your name and information gets sold to a lot of different people for you to get a lot of information by email or by mail. not much of that mail is intentional just to you. Now, you will hopefully, if you've done well academically or there's a talent there, you could start getting mail that's directly to you. But understand that a lot of that is promotion. A lot of that is help trying to get them and their name on your radar. You still need to go through the search process. You still need to digest. You still need to eliminate options. You'll get overwhelmed if you just go by what all is being mailed to you or emailed to you. You have to find a way to eliminate that by doing your own research and figuring out your own methods of what interests and fit is best for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Trevor. And then I have another question here. What advice would you give someone who is struggling between whether to choose a college based off of comfort or academics?
I mean, I hope you're choosing one for both. But don't choose a school because you think you're going to enjoy it, but get overwhelmed academically. Don't choose a school because you just want to go and have fun, but then you're not challenged academically. I mean, it's got to have both. Christy, I don't know if you have any feedback for that too.
Yeah, and this is where I think you get the gist now from me that I'm a big fan of writing these things down, because I think clarity does come from that. But that's where I shared the pie with you around a major, but I think you could do the same thing with a college and think about all of those spheres that Trevor talked about. What do I want from academics? What do I want from co-curricular? What do I want from the relational stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Start with your values and the things that are important to you so that you have a measuring stick, because college is not just one of any of those things. It's all of those things, particularly if you are going to enter into a residential experience where this is your life, this is your, your relationships and all of those things. And so, yeah, I think rather than look at it as an either or, think about what are the things that are most important to me, and be broad about that, because that matters.
Absolutely. And we will end it on this one final question right here regarding majors and minors. What is the biggest difference between a major and a minor compared to doing a double major, say? And why is it helpful to choose a major and a minor over a double major, or vice versa?
So I think that the key differentiator is depth of coursework. And so at most institutions, they have a number of credits that you need to reach to graduate. And those credits are broken down into major credits from your major, credits from your general education curriculum, and then free electives, which are credits that you take wherever you want, because you need to get to that number, but you have some space to do that, right? And so, because I work in career development, employers tend to want breadth and depth, right? They want you to have some depth in a particular area that you're developing some competencies. But because we know that most graduates today are going to jump around to lots of different careers, mm-hmm. that breadth that you're going to get from a number of those areas is going to matter. Now, I would say too that when it comes to the relationship between major and career, a lot of employers, I'll just be honest with you, behind the scenes will say to us when they come to our career fairs, we'll consider any major, right? Because we're looking for skills, we're looking for a type of person. Now that tends to be in organizations that don't, a hospital's not going to say that for a nurse, right? They want somebody who has the preparation to be a nurse. Same with public education. But those tend to be more the minority than the majority. So I say that just to sort of open your mind to the possibility of how you might be able to, for some students, double majoring is really going to set them apart. For others, it's just going to satisfy an interest, but it may not make them more of a better candidate for a particular job. So that's where, talk to career counselors about that at the institutions that you're considering, and they can help you through that thinking process.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, that does conclude all of our time available today. Thank you so much for attending Tips on Choosing a Best Fit College and a Major. Thank you to my panelists, Trevor, Christy, you were both excellent, very informative, very helpful for the high school students and parents and everyone who really values this kind of information. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and speak and give a few words. Just a friendly reminder for everyone, you can explore your college options in our virtual college fair. We have hundreds of interactive virtual booths where you can watch videos, download material, and even chat live with admissions representatives from institutions. You also find that some booths have a schedule of their own live stream video presentations, so you can visit those today or another day if they're available. Again, this presentation will be available, recorded, and is available tomorrow to rewatch for everyone who was a participant today and wasn't able to make it. Once again, Trevor, Christy, thank you so much. I'm sure everyone in the audience giving you a big round of applause if you could hear it. But that does conclude our time today, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy and has a nice evening. Good night.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep.